Okay, so here's the deal. We got this Bobcat. It's a 2002 963 Bobcat, and I was getting an AHC error code 3432. And that error code for the advanced hand controls is referring to the tilt valve not being calibrated. So I was going a little bit crazy. We're supposed to get a 1.5 feet of snow here in 2 days, and I had it all torn apart. I was watching YouTube videos like crazy and looking up manuals online, and I've got no experience with Bobcat. We just bought this unit, and I've actually got no industrial or heavy equipment experience at all, so this is all brand new. So I was researching like crazy, and I was having a hard time sleeping because I was thinking we're gonna need a controller and maybe a couple actuators. There's some really good work on YouTube out there by a couple of gentlemen that can't remember their names right now, but if you search for this error 3432 or no lift, no tilt, you're gonna find their videos, and they've got some excellent work on actuator repair, because the actuators are terrible on these things and they always blow up, so apparently. So I ripped out my actuators, took off the upper actuator, which is your lift, or which is your tilt actuator, and it all spec'd out, bench tested great, had 2 volts right at neutral position, and I ripped out the bottom one and it bench tested great as well. And they're both newer actuators. They've got date stamps on them, and they've obviously been changed. They've got the little aluminum adapters in between them and the valve body. So I thought my actuators were great, so that's why I was looking at the controller, which is stuck on the side of this thing inside here. That's where the controller is. It's just a metal box with a bunch of electric gizmos inside. And it's hard to say what's gone wrong when you have an electrical problem. So I was just getting ready to throw a bunch of parts at it, about $5,000 worth of parts at it. After 2 days of pulling this thing apart and ripping through it and getting nowhere. It's super esoteric because you can poke holes in wires and run around with your multimeter all day long, and part of the time you're thinking you're getting the problem solved, and then the other half of the time you realize that you have no idea what you're looking for or what you're looking at. It's very difficult to get actual specs on a lot of this stuff, or I found it difficult. But I'm going to show you what exactly was the problem with this machine. You'd turn it on and it would beep 3 times. It would turn on the AHC light, and it would throw a code 3432, and it would drive, but it would not lift the arms and it would not tilt the bucket. So according to the Bobcat manual, the way this thing works is when you turn the key on, it fires up the computer and it starts running through some different stuff. So it starts running through your switch handles and your joysticks. Make sure their sensors are right and everything's good there. Then it'll go to your tilt sensor, your tilt actuator, and test that. If that's good, it'll move on to the lift actuator and continue with the process. But because your tilt actuator is the first one in the chain, in this case, in my situation, that is where the problem was. And so it was beeping out when it got to that. As soon as it got to that tilt actuator, it was given a code and turning on a light, and not doing anything else, not doing much else. There was a little clunk that you'd hear when you turn the key on after about 2 seconds, and that was the end of that. So I thought, well, I'm gonna check the voltages on these, and if you want to learn about voltages on your actuators and what they should be and how to change them, how to calibrate them manually, you go on YouTube and search that 3432. there's a guy, he's got an amazing bench setup. He's got a spool valve put on the bench, and the actuators set up on it. He's got a little servo to manually extend and retract the actuator and let you see what's going on with the potentiometer or the Hall effect sensor and the voltage, the 5-volt reference signal that's coming out of that. So huge shout out to that guy, whoever he is. I'll try to find his video and get the name, put it in the comments, because that was the only reason that I'm fixing this thing right now. And that saved me a lot of money. So I thought, well, okay, last ditch effort before I go and buy a computer, I'm going to calibrate the reference voltage of my tilt sensor while it's in the machine, because I calibrated it on the bench, put it back in, and it still had the problem. It says not calibrated, 34, 32. So I ripped it out and checked the voltage, and it was a little high. It was 2.39. So I said, well, I'll rip it off. I'll rip off the cap, adjust that the little gear that runs the Hall effect sensor inside my actuator, and bring it down to 2 volts and see where we stand. So I did that, and while I had the cap off, I turned the gear to where I had 2 volts, and I turned the key on in the Bobcat, and lo and behold, there's no AHC light, there's no code, there's no beeping, just awesome, works the way it should. So that got me really excited, and I was going to do a YouTube video and show you inside the actuator and all that stuff, but I got so excited I tore it all apart, and I was too busy to take a YouTube video. So I'm just going to tell you what you can look for if you are having this problem. Once I took the cap off the actuator, there's 3 little screws that hold the motor, the little electric motor, onto the actuator, and all those screws were loose, and one had fallen out, and that little screw got jammed up in the gears, the Hall effect sensor gears, and they were binding, and that is what was causing my problem. So as it turns out, as I always say, there's no such thing as an electrical problem. It could look like an electrical problem, but electronics don't have problems. Somebody's gonna correct me on this in the comments, but you getting codes and lights and bad voltages, or it's not an electrical problem. You've either got a bad ground or a broken wire. That's all mechanical stuff. So everything's in there, it's working, but here's this screw jamming up the Hall effect sensor gear. So the electronics think they're broken, but they're actually just fine. I suppose maybe in a solid state sensor or something like that, you might have a breakdown, but I would argue that that's always going to be mechanical if you break it down far enough. So let's just have a little look inside here. I've got the light on, and here's our actuators. That's where they are. You know exactly where they are if you've been looking at this problem already. Rip out your actuator that's having the problem, pop the cap off, have a look inside there, just have a little look and see if your screws have fallen out. Because if they have, you're going to be in major trouble, but you're going to be really happy when you find it because it's a cheap fix. So pop that apart, have a look at that, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments, and I'll see if I can help you out, because this was stressing me out, and hopefully this helps somebody else with their Bobcat issues.